Hello friends, my name is Igor Gavrищak. This is the YouTube platform of Channel 24. Well, recently the Shaheeds began to fly not only to the territory of Ukraine, but also to neighboring Belarus. We will talk about this and more with our guest. This is Pavlo Latushko, Deputy Head of the Transitional Cabinet of Belarus. Pavel, hello, glory to Ukraine, living Belarus. Glory to the heroes, living forever. Pavel Pavlovich, first of all, I want to say this to our viewers: whoever watches to the end will find out what Lukashenko officially offered you and what you answered him. It's all serious, it's not a joke, so please wait, listen to everything. Pavel Pavlovich, let's start with the fact that not today, not on September 10th, but recently, a lot of Shaheeds, a lot of UAVs that fly from the Russian Federation to Ukraine, fly into the territory of Belarus. How to explain this? Because allegedly Belarus also raises aircraft and shoots down these drones. Is this a provocation for whom? For what? And can this be called some kind of new step in relations between Putin and Lukashenko? The most logical explanation that the Lukashenko regime could come up with is the effectiveness of Ukrainian electronic warfare, which knocks drones off course and thus they fly into the territory of Belarus. But they cannot explain this, because it is not so. And, based on this, they come up with different versions. Again, how can you explain if electronic warfare works in such a way that one of the drones flies and falls on the territory of Latvia, or the other flies up to 70 kilometers of the border with Lithuania, or flies over Mogilev, or heads towards Vitebsk, and so on? Okay, there's at the border, yes, they're not far away. So they can't explain. We understand that these are Russian drones, but, again, Lukashenko cannot admit that these are Russian drones, because if he admits it, then he will have to protest. We remember this fake story with a UFO, allegedly Ukrainian drones, that flew there over the Mogilev region. How many of them were there? There were 9 of them. He called them there. In the end they showed one, some rusty, and the rest went in the direction of Yaroslavl. Lukashenko never received the order for the defense of Yaroslavl. The Russians did not shoot down the drones, at least they did not report it, but he made up a fake story, of course. So, now, I think, there is a struggle for the airspace over Belarus, a struggle between Putin and Lukashenko. Putin says that this is a territory that I can use for military purposes, I will use it, and he sends Lukashenko's drones, trying to prove, no, after all, this is my territory. Probably, this message sounds, Vova, we did not agree on this. We agreed on what, and what Lukashenko agreed with Putin. First of all, there are threats on the state border of Ukraine. Threats are created along the state border with NATO countries, and last week he sent a tactical group, for example, to the borders with Lithuania. There are tanks, infantry fighting vehicles. He began exercises in the Grodno and Brest regions just recently. He sent 3,000, and some estimate even up to 400 or 400 special operations forces, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, to Ukraine, but this is not a group that can really attack and cause any serious damage to Ukraine. That is, he agreed to produce weapons, to transfer everything that is necessary for the army, to help circumvent sanctions, which he has been doing for years and quite successfully. But he did not agree on everything else. Why? Because for Lukashenko there is such a thesis, a narrative: I will provide you with a peaceful sky over Belarus. There is no war, because this is Lukashenko, and this is a false thesis. There is no war, because the Belarusian people do not want war, and they are afraid of the reaction of the Belarusian people. On the other hand, he has already brought the war to the territory of Belarus, leaving it for aggression in 2022, without providing support for this aggression now. Including the fact that they began to shoot down drones over Gomel. This is also a fact that there is no longer a peaceful sky over Belarusians. One drone fell, the building was damaged and caught fire, and if there were people there. Another reason, Lukashenko complains that he supplied supplies to the Ministry of Defense for the needs of the Russian army, and the Russian Ministry of Defense is not paid under the state order. And he expressed these claims to Putin, as far as we know. In response to these incomprehensible gestures at the border, Putin put oil for Belarusian refineries on prepayment. Maybe now this problem has been solved, but he put on prepayment. Lukashenko said, no, I can't buy prepaid, he has a negative trade balance. Yes, salaries are growing there, but the balance is very seriously suffocating it. There is nothing to pay with. And there is also a tactical problem here. Now they don't call each other, well, let's see what happens tomorrow. But at the same time, such tactical squabbles exist between them. The struggle for airspace, as we can see, is obvious. As I understand it, Pavel Pavlovich, that their relations were not friendly anyway, let's put it this way, and now they're even worse. Well, you know, about the friendship of Lukashenko and Putin, you know, as a marriage of convenience, something for something. Especially this marriage of convenience has been clearly manifested since 2020, when Lukashenko simply catastrophically lost the elections, crawled on his knees. In Sochi, remember these memes, when he sits on Putin's lap like a child, it was published everywhere, and asked him for support. Only thanks to Russia did he manage to retain power, usurping it and holding it by force. Therefore, there is a friendship of convenience. Then he promised Putin that he would go on transit. But he did not go. Does Putin need this transit now? I think that everything depends on Lukashenko's behavior. You know, like a guilty boy, Putin watches how he will behave and carry out his will. Well, maybe I'll give you another label for kingship. Because Lukashenko's subjectivity is limited. He is the administrator of the territory. In many ways he has lost leverage in foreign policy. In domestic policy he still has something. In military policy he has lost leverage. Even now we see the struggle for airspace as confirmation of this, yes. Well, no independent state will allow itself to use its territory and airspace for the purpose of aggression of another state against a third state. Therefore, their relations, again, right now they're shaking. And the closer to the elections that Lukashenko spoke about today, the more tense they can become. In the deck of cards in the Kremlin, there are cards that do not have the name Alexander and not the surname Lukashenko written on them. And he knows it. But on the other hand, there are Belarusians who do not want war. And these swings, how he swings on them, whether he falls off them or not, but he has rocked them a lot since 2020 and then since 2022. We will remember the 2025 elections. We also mentioned it at the beginning of our conversation. I would also like to ask about the units of the Russian Federation that were in Belarus in 2023. Ukrainian border guards say that Russia has withdrawn all its thousands of units to the territory of Belarus and has not brought anyone to the exercises. And also Belarusian trucks, MAZ trucks, are already visible in the Luhansk region. Pavel Pavlovich, this is a marriage of everything related to the forces and means of Russia, because the troops have been withdrawn. They have not brought in new ones for, as I understand it, for training. I remember that we talked about the fact that Russia's military potential does not allow training as many people as are called up and who sign contracts. Well, on the one hand, I think that this is Russia's lack of resources, human resources. Unfortunately, we say, but how could it be otherwise? This is how they use their people as a resource. There is no one to direct. On the other hand, I think that Russia is also pragmatic. And why should they pay Lukashenko for this? Why use Belarusian landfills? You remember, throughout 2023, in fact, there for a very long time, all the training grounds were in a state of permanent exercises. There were not only the Belarusian armed forces, or partially only Belarusian, but Russian mobilized people trained there, they had to pay for it. Well, probably, in Russia they have calculated why pay Lukashenko, it is better to spend this money within ourselves. Well, again, corruption. There are generals imprisoned one by one. It is better to make money on the spot and steal this money there. I think that these are the two factors that, first of all, determined why there are no Russian troops. The third factor, do you know, does Putin plan to use the territory of Belarus for aggression? From the point of view of strategy, of course, any logic, any military expert will say that this is an advantageous location. But, again, there are no resources. Can he force Lukashenko to send the army, and does he? I recently spoke with a number of high-ranking diplomats from the German Foreign Ministry, the Swedish Foreign Ministry, the Slovenian Foreign Ministry and the Czech Foreign Ministry. I asked the state secretaries of these foreign ministries, tell me, do you have information that Putin is forcing Lukashenko to send the army to Belarus, or forced him? None of the interlocutors confirmed this to me. We have never received real insider information that such actions were actually carried out by Putin. Why? Because he understands that the Belarusian army is not able to perform tasks on its own. He does not have the resources to add Russian soldiers. And thirdly, I think there is such a calculation. If the Belarusian armed forces are sent, this will lead to unrest within the country of Belarus, and any unrest can develop into even greater unrest. Should Russia then direct resources to suppress the protests, because, of course, they want to control Belarus? We do not and cannot have any other option, and I am afraid that they're also not very interested in the good or bad Lukashenko, whatever he is, but so far he suits the Russians. Pavel Pavlovich, there are 2 more decrees signed by Lukashenko. The first decree is a pardon. Once again, he pardoned 30 political prisoners in a short time, but there are no key people like Maria Kolesnikova. She has already lost a lot of weight. Why does he do this? To whom does he want to show what? Whom does he want to convince and of what? Or is it all on the eve of the 2025 elections? And here I also want a decree on the security forces. He signed that now there are changes in the issues of service in the internal affairs bodies of Belarus. As far as I understand, he is just seriously strengthening and gives more rights to the security forces of Belarus. They can now create some kind of patriotic squads, clubs there and, under certain circumstances, receive free medicine, food, and more. As for political prisoners, just yesterday was a terrible date, 550 days in a state of communication in relation to Serhiy Tsikhanouski, one of the potential candidates for the elections in 2020. In total, there are 7 Belarusian political prisoners in the status of incommunicate, most of whom have already exceeded the period of absence of any communication, understanding of what is happening to them and in what condition they are. There is no lawyer, they are in contact, no family member, no one. And this is terrible, including Maria Kolesnikova, who was remembered, Mikolai Statkovich, the leader of the Social Democrats, Losik, a journalist of Radio Liberty, and many others. In general, when Lukashenko signs a decree, he, of course, tries to repeat such a cyclicality. Each election cycle, at the end, it came to the conclusion that it was necessary to somehow try to bargain with the West, get at least some loyalty from the West and lift sanctions. But now the scale of repression is such that it will not work. Again, the sanctions were imposed for a number of reasons. These are political repression of human rights. This is the hijacking of a civilian aircraft. By the way, one of the reasons why Lukashenko shoots down drones is that he does not want drones to fly in the airspace of Belarus. He wants to open the sky, but this is unrealistic. Sanctions were imposed for aggression against Ukraine and sanctions were imposed for the migration war, but he is trying to play this topic. But the main thing is that we must understand, assess the situation as a whole. If yesterday in Brest, 10 people were convicted for participating in the Brest Circle dance, this is the 8th mass protest of activists in Brest, in this case of the Brest Circle dance in the center of the Brest intersection in 2020. If yesterday 4 people were sentenced in Białorussia to a year and a half in prison, if yesterday a former political prisoner was detained and a criminal case was reopened, and this is every day. I give only a few examples from yesterday, but in fact there are many more. If the repressions have not stopped, what signals does he give to whom? For us, it is important for everyone to be free, absolutely, this is human life, this is above all. But when he lets go and plants the same number again, what signals are we talking about? And today I had a meeting with the ambassadors of Great Britain, and on Saturday I was with the ambassadors of Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Croatia, and Sweden will be tomorrow. I tell everyone that you can't buy it, it's all fakes. What about the military? Well, he needs the loyalty of the Gestapo, GUBOPIC, which calls itself the main directorate for combating organized crime of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. They call themselves the Belarusian Gestapo, and the Belarusians call them the Gestapo. They need buns, they need apartments, they need medical care not only for them, but for their families. You know how he buys them. And he will strengthen, increase their help so that they protect him. It is he who holds his power on bayonets, not on the love of the people. If he loved the people, he would not repress every day. If the people supported him, then why does he put new people in prison every day? This means the Belarusians continue to fight. After all, there are grounds to detain the military. Yesterday, the day before yesterday, it seems, 2 former officers were detained and criminal cases were opened. 2 weeks ago in Vitebsk, 6 officers, juniors, lieutenants were detained. This, by the way, is the state in the army. But to buy loyalty, he needs to give them more money, apartments, medical care, and so on. Military patriotic clubs. He has already created 950 military patriotic clubs for children. He wants to stupefy children with his ideology. Ideology can already be defined as Lukashism. There is a cult of personality in Belarus. This is a la Stalin. Repressions, perhaps, are not yet being shot in the forests, but they have already been shot in the streets. The military has already been given the right to shoot and be responsible for it. Changes have been made to the military regulations. Therefore, the cult of personality and ideology, which tries to introduce into the brains of children as Lukashism, that Lukashism must live after it. But I will upset him. After he is gone, this Lukashism will stop existing. Pavel Pavlovich, I would also like to recall China, because the other pole where Lukashenko is drawn is China, Russia and China. And here is unexpected news, at least for me, because China has finally decided, despite the fact that in June, a high-ranking representative of China came to Belarus. Lukashenko literally said today that he was very pleased with the arrival, that everything was very beautiful. Against this background, I believe that China has finally refused to supply 15 new trains to Belarus for fear of falling under the sanctions of the United States of America. As I understand it, China, well, it is clear that China does not assess and does not consider the subjectivity of Ukraine, but Belarus, what and who Belarus is for China, that it is so. We will not transfer sanctions, we will not transfer them. What is Belarus for China? It is better to answer the question, who is Lukashenko for China? Nobody, nobody, he is a zero, and I will also upset him. If there is a conditional Pyotr Petrovich as the president of the country in Belarus, China will suit Pyotr Petrovich, if he ensures the economic interests of China. This is the transit of goods to the European Union, this is hundreds of billions of supplies, this is a huge market that China is interested in. It needs this stability. Whatever the sphere of influence, China will assess pragmatism primarily from the point of view of economic interests. The fact that China refused to supply locomotives for the Belarusian railway is an example of the threat of secondary sanctions. We are saying that these sanctions should also apply to the financial sector. We see how much pressure the financial situation is beginning to put on Russia due to the fact that Chinese banks refuse to transfer yuan or conduct financial transactions with banks in the Russian Federation. But the problem is that the Americans and Europeans have imposed appropriate large-scale sanctions on the financial system of the Russian Federation, but have not imposed on the financial system of the Lukashenko regime. And here, for now, this tool can be used by Lukashenko to circumvent sanctions. This is what Lukashenko Putin needs for, by the way. By the way, one of the conditions why he can keep it somewhere, and even give him some kind of carte blanche for some kind of communication with the West, he needs to circumvent sanctions. This is a channel for the supply of goods, technologies that are used in the military industry, including financial transactions. We need to look at this side, and therefore we explain this to our partners. On Friday, there will be a large conference in Vilnius, where I will speak, among other things, on sanctions policy, and I will talk about this. But China, if it refused and carries out financial transactions with the Lukashenko regime, it would be a very powerful blow. But this is possible if sanctions are imposed on the financial sector of Belarus. Americans. By the way, there is also very interesting news about the Americans. I didn't expect it somehow, I even checked if it was true. But tell me, Pavel Pavlovich, the Belarusian side has received an invitation to take part in the observation of the elections in the United States of America. We have been talking about this today, September 10th, well, we have been talking since September 10th, said Chairman of the House of Representatives of the National Assembly of Belarus Igor Sergeyenko. How true is this and, if so, how to perceive it? You know, I thought about this, and I am also somewhat surprised. Of course, Sergeyenko is a KGB general, a former first deputy representative of the KGB, capable of carrying out information operations. We need to see, maybe there is not enough time to analyze whether there is such an observation institution in the United States of America, national observers who come from specific parliaments on a bilateral line. Because, as far as I know, the Americans did not invite them through the OSCE, although they did invite OSCE missions. Representatives of the House of Representatives will be invited to the OSCE mission. So this needs to be dealt with. So far, it looks like a fake, so far it looks like untrue information. We need to figure out who was the inviting party. This invitation was addressed to the OSCE ODIHR, the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, which monitors elections, including in the United States of America. Or is it at the bilateral level? On a bilateral level, I don't believe it. The US Congress, who will invite representatives of Lukashenko's parliament and his parliament to observe. Through the OSCE ODIHR, it is theoretically possible that they will try to get into it. But we will need to find out. Pavel Pavlovich, I would like to ask you now, if Putin feels his end and understands that everything is going down, will Lukashenko go along with Putin because he has no future, or will he still try to save himself separately from Putin, if possible?
Этого корабля вместе с Путиным пойдет и Лукашенко, потому что у него нет будущего, или есть, вы мне скажете, без России, или все же он будет спасаться отдельно от Путина?
He will grab this Russian drone, which will fly in the airspace, and try to fly somewhere far away. Of course, he is the kind of person who is like a political animal. We all know examples from World War II, when ardent allies of the Nazis switched sides and somehow tried to save themselves. But you need to understand that he will not succeed for the simple reason that there is a Belarusian society that will never agree to forgive him crimes against humanity against the Belarusian people, mass repression. And I hope that Ukraine will never agree to forgive him for the act of aggression that he supported and actively supports to this day. So there will certainly be attempts to save him in this situation. He, of course, will knock on all doors, in Kyiv, and in Washington, and in Berlin, and in Warsaw, anywhere to save his skin. If he receives a message about the unreality of this, he will flee. He can flee in several directions. This is the United Arab Emirates. His eldest son, they say, already has the status of a resident of the United Arab Emirates. He has already purchased real estate there, a house, including for Lukashenko. He can go to Qatar, where, as in the Emirates, his money may be located. In China, we see that Kolya Lukashenko is learning Chinese, and this potential refuge may be for him. He may also travel to the Russian Federation, depending on how events develop in Russia, since he has also received a plot of land there and is building a residence there. This is the initiative of the Belarusian security forces Belpol, which conducted an investigation into the fact that he is building a residence for himself next to Putin. So he will have to run away, and run away very quickly, so that the story with Kosescu does not repeat itself. If it comes out, the people, of course, are a disunited crowd, but no one will be able to restrain it. I am not calling for it. I would generally dream of seeing him in the dock. The best option is in the National Belarusian Court in Belarus, in a live broadcast, so that all Belarusians can watch it. Well, it will suit me well if it is the Gaga, the International Criminal Court. Pavel Pavlovich, as we promised at the beginning of our conversation, let's remember the presidential elections, the so-called presidential elections in 2025. I will quote Lukashenko what he said, and then I will ask you. Quote, I just want to advise them, as always. If they want to turn the country upside down and participate in the presidential elections, prove their rightness or something else, they need to come and fight in the presidential elections. And Lukashenko mentioned you. He said, Pavlo Latushko, what kind of invitation is this? How tempting is it for you, Pavel Pavlovich? Tell me. Well, I replied to Lukashenko. I am ready to take part in the presidential election in 2025. I am ready to tell Belarusians who Lukashenko is, what he is, what democracy is and what democratic forces are. But I have a number of conditions that he must fulfill. These are the conditions for the release of all political prisoners, the release of former presidential candidates who are in prison, including Viktor Babarika and Shahe Sikhanouski. There are conditions that he must stop all criminal cases that he has initiated against activists of the democratic movement since 2020, and cancel the sentences imposed. By the way, one of these conditions prevents me from participating. I was sentenced to 18 years in prison in a maximum security colony. And then, by the way, there will be the lifting of the sanctions that he recalls, including in my context. It should ensure international election observation, national election observation at each polling station. I will even say more, I will be able to defeat you, Lukashenko, even being abroad, if I am registered as a candidate for the presidency of Belarus, if only one condition is provided: international, independent and national observation at all polling stations. I can defeat you, Lukashenko, because you are a coward, you are a liar. I will be able to win not because I am Pavlo Latushko, but because the Belarusian people will win. I am convinced that there are a lot of Belarusian politicians who are able to defeat you, including those politicians who, unfortunately, are in prison today. If they are freed, they will be able to defeat you. Because Belarusians made their choice in 2020. They did not change their minds. Belarusians hate you, Alexander Lukashenko. But you are a coward, you are a traitor, you are a murderer. You will never agree to fulfill these conditions, because you are not able to do it. In all previous election campaigns, Lukashenko put all presidential candidates in prison, he killed potential presidential candidates, he launched mass repressions. And this is his approach. Yes, now he is trying to get someone with weapons there trying to change the government, but when he tells a story, he talks about himself. We remember 2020, when he ran around with a machine gun, when he gave his son a machine gun, when he gave orders to shoot Belarusians in the street, when he gave orders to kill people in prisons. He talks about himself, but he tries to talk about what the opposition wants. To organize us, to show that we are incapable of anything. Yes, we are capable, we are ready, but fulfill these conditions. Here is my answer to Lukashenko. Pavel Pavlovich, there is nothing to add here. Thank you for this conversation and thank you for taking the time to discuss important processes in Belarus and remembering Lukashenko's offer to take part in the elections, as well as clearly giving him instructions that he will definitely not fulfill. Thank you very much. Thank you. Take care. With us was the deputy head of the party committee of Belarus, Pavlo Latushko. Be sure to subscribe, comment, like and share our conversations. My name is Igor Gavrищак. See you on the air of Channel 24.